Hey, Global Chatter Tribe. Many of you know that part of my professional background is both in career development and education, which means I get a number of people, especially educators, asking how they can launch their careers abroad. If that's you, you need the International Educator, which connects English-speaking teachers with opportunities at international schools around the world. Not only do you find out about vacancies, but you get much needed information on topics as varied as free housing, tax-free salaries, and professional development. And here's the thing, all subjects and grade levels are needed at schools in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. So for a limited time only, TIE, as it's known for short, is offering discounts on memberships for Global Chatter listeners. So visit TIE Online, that's TIE online.com, and use the promo code Global Chatter to save on your membership today. If you looked at the beginning of Dr. Sherrá Watkins' story, it was unlikely that she would become an expat. She and her twin sister were born to a teenage single mom who struggled hard to provide for her children. However, Sherrá and her sister were also surrounded by a large extended family that gave them a close-knit community. This is important because it was her family that would reinforce the dreams of going beyond what she had as a kid and a teenager. Determination is most certainly a running theme in her life. Ultimately, she and her sister would earn PhDs. A psychotherapist by profession, it shouldn't be surprising then that mental wellness is a frequent discussion point in this episode. Sherrá is currently Director of Wellness and Counseling at the American University of the Caribbean in St. Maarten, otherwise known as the Netherlands Antilles. In this role, she oversees wellness counseling services for medical students and their families and provides oversight, leadership, and supervision to the wellness counselors, a role that she obtained and relocated for during the pandemic. As you might imagine, most of her educational community is made up of expats, students and faculty that have come from all across the world to either further their education or career. In addition to sharing her own story, Sherrá provides some insight on how to adjust to some of the most common challenges international students face, including homesickness, anxiety, and loneliness. Sherrá's story starts in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, but you will hear the twists and turns that have led her and her family to the life that they are building in St. Maarten. Welcome to the Chatter.
Okay, so it is very rare that I'm doing an episode with somebody who's from North Carolina. And so I was geeking off the air because I got somebody who's from North Carolina. And for some of you who ask all the time, where in the world am I? I am in the Tar Heel State. And so this guest, I think, is going to bring some knowledge and some wisdom that quite often many of us need, especially when it comes around mental care and mental wellness. So Dr. Sherrá Watkins is joining us on the podcast today. How are you, Sherrá?
Hello, everyone. Good.
I wish y'all could see her smile. She glowing, and I don't know if it's the island life. It might be the island life, to be honest.
It is.
Because North Carolina is great, but it ain't no island. So
not at all. By any means.
But for me, especially as someone who's also a counselor, I just love folks who this is their space because we don't talk enough about this, particularly for those of us who are in Black and Brown communities. I think for those of us who are expats, for those of us who just are going through some stuff and are trying to figure out resources and how to support, especially to move. And so I have just asked Sherrá to come on here, and she's just going to talk about her life, and we're going to talk about what she does and maybe some resources she has. And hopefully by the end of it, I will have all the links as to where you can find her and her business and on social media, because you guys know that's what I do. So this is the first question I always ask folks because they always want to know. So where in the world are you?
I am in St. Maarten, and I have to be specific. I'm on the Dutch side of St. Maarten. And so that's typically known as the Netherlands Antilles. Mm-hmm. And so I have been here for almost 2 years.
I've been a lot of places. This is really shocking to people. I've never been to the Caribbean.
Oh.
I know. And I've been to the ends of, except for Antarctica, but to the ends of Earth and back. And somehow the Caribbean, literally, been to Singapore, been to the Middle East, been to Africa, been to Europe, been to South America a couple of times, and somehow I have not gotten to an island. How did you, what took you to St. Martin? Like, what took you there? Like, what's the story? Did you grow up abroad? Did you marry and it took you there? Like, why are you there?
Look, none of the above. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, with a teenage single mother who had identical twins at the age of 18. We were not poor.
Wow.
We were po.
First of all, for those of y'all who don't know, so Winston-Salem, because that's exotic.
Also, AKA known as the Trefo to my people. Okay.
Maybe for some of y'all who don't know, Greensboro might be the next spot. Yes. Okay, so that's in the center of North Carolina. So this is a whole North Carolinian geography episode. Yes. It's in the center. Okay, I didn't know all of this. Tell me more. All right, so you grew up in Winston.
Grew up in Winston. Wow. Was raised definitely as what we call the collective, raised by the village. Since my mom had us young, we was raised alongside my aunties, my uncles, and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother and paternal grandmother, and moved around a whole lot. We went to 5 different elementary schools just because, financial issues and evictions and all that type of stuff. Yeah. But what was interesting in that journey is that I always had an embedded in friend. I was born with my best friend, as we often say. So shout out to my twin sister, Dr. Shantae Elbert. That's where things begin. Around the age of about maybe 7 or 8, unfortunately, our father, who was very active in our life in the beginning, became addicted to crack cocaine. So we are also, unfortunately, a part of the crack epidemic. And that's when things began to spiral for him, in and out of trouble in prison, up until our graduate career. He finally was able to come home in 2014 or 15. That was his life. And so from there, we were raised by a mother who was a nurse. My grandmother made sure that she said, no matter what happened, you're going to school. So my mom is a LPN. Now she works as a nurse administrator. My maternal grandmother, she was a nurse, born and bred, and she went into doing home nursing later on in her life before she passed away our junior year. So we were just really created and surrounded by family. And then our family is very large on both sides. And we have family that's also in the country parts of North Carolina. So what we call Davie and Davidson County and Lexington, our families is way deep down in there also. So yeah, they're deep. And so we got a little twang to us. And so we grew up in a family that was very close-knit. And we also are a singing family. So I can't sing like my mom and grandmother, but I can hold a note. And I've learned to harmonize over the years. So yes. And so growing up, I wanted to be a nurse, just like my mom and grandmother. And so that's what I went to school for. I went to East Carolina University as a pre-nursing major. That didn't work out.
Wow. And I mean, so here's the thing. It's so inspirational. And you already alluded to your sister. Yes. And if people didn't catch it, there was a doctor in front of her name as well. What was the motivation for both of y'all? Obviously, you came out of some challenging circumstances, but you actually also came out of a supportive environment with the grandparents and extended family.
I think the motivation for us is that we wanted to be what we didn't see and what we did see. What we saw was Black strong women who were educated. So my auntie is a lawyer. My uncle was in the military. Unfortunately, my other uncle passed away very young, in his mid-20s. And so he was a tradesman. So he was a plumber and electrician. But they told us that they expected greatness. And so when we talked about me and my twin, we always knew we wanted to be doctors. I thought I was going to go on to be a DNP. And she thought she was going to go on to be a doctor or something, but she didn't quite just know yet. At first, it was athletic training. Then we both got into school and was like, this is not working. And so somewhere along the lines, I told her, I said, I want to move overseas. By the time I got to college, I want to be able to get beyond these walls, because what I learned is that many of my family members, regardless of education, they didn't have a passport and they never left the U.S. Yeah. Some of them have never even left North Carolina. And I was like, oh, I'd be dang. I can't be in that type of box. And so probably right after I finished, in the midst of me completing my doctorate is when I started looking for jobs overseas. That's how early it began. Mm-hmm.
So you knew I'm not saying early on that you wanted to go abroad. Wow.
I did. Just wanted to see what else was out there. When you grow up in the projects and you see just different types of struggle, but you also see different types of resiliency, you just wonder, what is it like, in different parts of the country where people are also struggling, but also they're also being resilient themselves. And I always wanted to travel to Europe, to the continent of Africa, just to see what was out there, just to try something.
So here's what I'm curious about, because especially if you didn't grow up in a family that necessarily traveled as much as maybe some of other folks I've interviewed, was there something, because I'm always very interested, especially with Black folks, was there something or a show or something that made you go, I could do that, or I want to do that? So like, I'm of the generation, I feel like you probably in this similar generation where, for example, good or bad, we saw A Different World and The Cosby Show that made us think about life in a different way, especially depending on what circumstances. So is there anything you can remember, or just something that made you think, okay, I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go somewhere? Or was it just a natural curiosity of, I just want to see what's outside of North Carolina?
Shout out to A Different World that turned me on to Greek life. I am Greek. But also shout out to them exposing me to terms such as study abroad, and those types of things. And so I remember being at a PWI, and they had multiple opportunities to study abroad, and I just couldn't afford it. Unfortunately, we were those children that, though we were living out of poverty at the time, the struggle was still real. And we had a younger brother by that time who was at home. We're 12 years apart. And so we were sending our financial aid checks home just to make sure that, the home can still be taken care of. And so I didn't get the chance to study abroad, while I watched some of my friends who went and studied abroad for a semester or for a whole year. And I'm just like, oh, I didn't get that experience. And so one way I was going to get it, one way.
So if you aren't familiar with the term, PWI is predominantly white institution at the higher ed level. So when we think about universities, man, so not to insert myself into your story, but I worked at a previous university I worked at, which was a major university, which was in an urban location. It was as weird as this term sounds, majority minority population. I got asked, how come we don't have enough Black and brown students studying abroad? Because when you looked at the numbers, right, even though numerically Black and brown students were in the majority, it was still predominantly white students. I think you just said something super key that folks don't understand. The financial responsibilities, especially on not even just first gen, low income, immigrant kids, right? Where, okay, you're getting X amount of money for financial aid, but you know that there's stuff going on at home. I can't spend X amount of money to go to Germany for whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months or a semester, knowing I've got financial responsibility. I think that's a weight that a lot of folks don't understand, that a lot of children of color or first generation students go through. And so I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts on that, just because I often hear people, why don't more people, Black and brown folks, study abroad? I'm like, they can't. It's not even just being affording to. It's these other responsibilities that are often a challenge.
I agree. And sometimes we have the motivation, we have the want and the ability, but it's also, there's still a small fear. What are we going to encompass when we get over there? Will we be looked at differently? So I think there's a fear factor that we also have to be realistic in sharing, that though I wanted to, there still was the fear of, what would the experience be like when I got over there? Would I truly be able to enjoy the experience? And so that was also a part of it. Like, okay, so we're over here. What type of food how do I navigate the language? How do I navigate transportation? All those different types of things. So that was still a part of my mind that also kept me a little rigid in trying to look for possible other resources. Like, okay, it'll come when maybe I'm a little bit more older, a little bit more mature. And so I think there's also some secondary reasons that also didn't push me to look for additional resources to make that happen.
So I guess I would ask you this question. Older you, who now obviously lives abroad, because this is a question I get a lot from Black and brown parents, is what would you tell then, sort of those Black and brown parents who are like, I got a kid who might be thinking about studying abroad, I'm not sure. Like, what do you think from your own experiences you would share with like those parents in terms of why they should consider it, or what are the ways to consider it?
What I would say is that let them be able to experience it and teach them to lean into fear. Fear is just emotion, just like any other emotion that we all exhibit and harness. And so, if we can teach our children to lean into the fears that they have, they're able to face a variety of different types of issues, which will always come along as a part of our lifetime. And then also teach them that even in living in that fear, that they can always ask for help with different types of resources. You can prepare for that fear. So, for example, watching YouTube, since we have technology now, they have apps, Google Translate, to make sure you have that set up on your phone. What are some ways that you can mediate that fear and prepare for it? But also for parents in their own fear of letting their babies go, is to just be mindful that they need to have that life experience of being able to travel abroad. And if parents can afford it, I always tell parents, quality over quantity. I would rather have taken a trip to some overseas country than yearly trips to Virginia Beach or Myrtle Beach.
Right. You say that, but that's what, because here that happens.
Yes, it does. It does.
That's why I'm laughing. Oh my God, Virginia Beach. I got stories. Anyway, I'm just, man, like, no shade. My family lives in Richmond. No shade. Oh, no. But like,
those are great beaches. And please take your children to the beach. We have Black people who've never been to the beach and never seen sand and water.
That is fair.
I say that in perspective and saying that if you can save 2 trips and maybe do something local to save up for maybe an overseas trip, even if it's only for 2 or 3 days, that can definitely go a long way in teaching children how to get on an airplane, how to navigate the airport, how to experience different foods. That is something in people outside of just the U.S. that's different. And they look at us as the other instead of vice versa.
Right. So I started this off with the original question. How did you get to St. Martin? So take us how you got to St. Martin. So we got you through school. Yes. And then what happened?
So I had applied and actually got multiple offers overseas, and it just wasn't the right time in my life.
Were they the Caribbean, or were they in just other parts of the world?
Other parts of the world. One was in will be considered a part of the Mediterranean. One was in Cyprus, Turkey. One was over in China. And I think those were the two.
And so this is once you'd completed your doctorate.
One was when I was finishing up my dissertation. The one in Cyprus. The second one was after I completed my doctorate. So yeah.
Interesting. What kind of positions were you looking at, or were they?
So the one in Cyprus was at a international university, teaching in their counseling department as an assistant professor. The second one was working as a military contractor, providing health education and counseling to military personnel and families on the base.
Okay, so that sounds fascinating.
It was.
So what happened? You didn't take
the one in Cyprus. My first marriage was on the rocks at that time, and I was like, okay, I remember one thing. So I'm licensed in mental health and counseling, and so as part of being in this field, we are required as a part of our curriculum to go to 12-step programs. And one popular quote in the rooms, as we call it for short, is "You take you wherever you go," especially when it comes to addiction and substance use. And I remember, am I going to take this drama from North Carolina to Cyprus? And I was like, it's not the time. It's just not the time. Not until we get to a healthier area of our marriage. And so, and the other one was they weren't trying to pay me. I was like, I'm a doctorate.
The first story was traumatic, but
the second was just as traumatic. I was like, do you not see these credentials? I'm triply licensed, people. I'm trying to get all the coins. Yeah. And so at that time I was a single parent by then, because we had divorced. And so I'm like, I'm not moving overseas with this. I think they was trying to pay me like $40,000. Oh, no. I'm like, they're like, it's tax free. I don't care. No, ma'am.
Because I'm assuming you had children at that point?
Yes, I had one son, and he was 1 year old. And I was like, no, regardless of all the benefits that you all are talking about, housing and things like that, that's not gonna have me pay off my student loans and pay for my bills from day to day.
Right.
So I applied for a job as a counseling director. Made it to, is actually with our sister school, Ross School of Medicine, that's in Barbados, and I made it to the second round. And I didn't get it, and I was devastated because I killed that interview. And so I remember sitting after I got the news that I didn't get it, and I said, God, I'm tired. I used the analogy of, I didn't planted the seed, I didn't tore the ground, I didn't reap the harvest. I'm ready, to kind of pack it up and take, my gift somewhere else. And I remember my therapist had told me, you can't apply for no more jobs, because the process had broken me completely.
Right.
And so my therapist says no more jobs. And so I remember listening to her, and I was like, okay. So it was right after Christmas, and it was nighttime. We had just cleared out the living room for all the toys and stuff. And I just happened to get online and saw an email come through from that same school. And it says, hey, because you applied for this job, have you seen this job? And so I looked at it, and I looked to the side. I'm like, does my therapist see me? Because all I had to do was press apply, because they already had my information.
Right.
So I pressed apply, and I ain't say nothing. And the next day, I texted her, I said, I know I'm in trouble, but I applied for a job. And she just put SMH, we'll talk later, because it was the holidays. And so by the time we talked, I had told her that I had an interview set up with the HR department. And literally from Christmas until the offer, 6 weeks. They flew me and my fiance at that time, now he's my husband, over here for a week and a half to interview and see the island. Everything just lined up perfectly. And so that's how we got here.
So I know a little bit about Ross, because in my role, as I was telling you that I'm at NC State's vet school, is that we get a couple of their offshore students from their College of Veterinary Medicine. Yes. So I know some of that. And man, first of all, I don't even know what to say as to...
Just know that my therapist forgave me. She did. She forgave me.
Right, because she's like... She probably was like, I can do an in-person session on the island if you need. We don't have to Zoom.
Yes. And so she's been a great support. Now she provides coaching ad hoc for me, because many of the stuff that I was going to counseling for, those are resolved and healed. So every now and then, if I just have stuff that I need to process, kind of like a check-in, she'll do a coaching session with me. But she's still a very much a part of my life. So I'm appreciative of her. But this journey was interesting because I got hired and was supposed to move, and COVID hit.
Oh, yes. So COVID disrupted everyone's plans. By the way, and this piece I don't want anyone to miss out on. Yes, even your therapist can have a therapist. Oh, so if you're on the
that's mandated.
I know this.
If your therapist don't have a therapist, you may want to sit there and put them on pause and go look elsewhere, because we all need help.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's super important, especially when we talk about mental care. I'm like, the people who you go to for care often got to make sure they're processing their own stuff so that they can be good at what they're doing to help you. So there's that part. Now, how did COVID interrupt this journey? Because you've been in St. Martin, what is it, less than 2 years or 2 years?
It's been 1.5 years, so 1 year and 6 months.
Okay. So you get the offer. Obviously, is this 2019 or 2020?
I got the offer in the end of January, and they wanted a quick start. I was like, dang it. And at that time I was working within a hospital system, working with sickle cell patients and hemophilia patients. So by my contract, I couldn't just up and leave. I had to at least give 4 weeks.
Okay.
Me and my husband at the time, we had just bought a brand new house. We hadn't even been in that house 5 months. Brand new furniture, everything. And when we got the offer, we had to decide, was we going to sell it or try to keep it, and we sold everything. Everything.
Including the house?
House sold, furniture sold, baby toys sold, everything was sold. And then 3 days before we were supposed to fly out, the island locked down and everything locked down. And literally, we was homeless. I was like, I gotta go back and stay with my mama.
I haven't stayed with you in a long time, but here I am with a husband and kids.
And after a week, I'm like, somebody's not gonna make it. But the thing about it is that, at Tellum, which owns 2 medical schools and a veterinarian school, they stood up. They did what they were supposed to do. They put us into an Airbnb and paid for it for 3 months.
In the States.
Wow. They're like, you're not going to struggle. And so that was it was a breath of fresh air to be able to sit there and say that I don't have to worry about where me and my children are going to lay our head, and while still working, because they still wanted me to start working.
So when did you were you able to make it onto the island?
We was able to come July July 7th of last year.
Okay, so
Yes.
you got the offer in January.
January.
The lockdown happened, and so it really wasn't until the middle of the year.
Yes.
And we were still trying to figure out, I mean, this is globally, right? What's happening with COVID. So
Yes.
how are they able to actually, because travel was still very restricted.
Let me go, girl, let me tell you. I was sitting at my computer, mind my business, and the email came through, and my boss said, "Hey, you free?" I said, "Yeah." She called me. She's like, "Hey, our national person over security who works with the government here, they have a flight of people who have been stuck in the U.S., and they putting together a repatriation flight for citizens of St. Maarten to come back home and get back home. Because of the status of my position, they're able to get you and your family on that flight too." I was like, "Okay, so when's the flight?" They were like, "In 3 days." I said,
okay.
Yeah.
Wait, but they said citizens though, right?
Yes. So I have citizenship now.
Because of the job?
Because of the job, I have dual citizenship. So we are citizens of St. Maarten and citizens of the U.S. And so, yeah, as a part of my job and the position I have here on campus, they got me and my family on that repatriation flight.
Are they hiring? Because
They are hiring. We are always hiring. Please go to @tellem. I don't know if it's .com or .org, but just go to @tellem. Put it in Google.
We can find it.
Yes.
We can find it. I'm saying this, and then we're gonna be like 500 people are gonna be like, there might be.
But look, there's some downsides. So let me go ahead and tell you, okay? To get our license transferred from the U.S. here, it's a 6 months process, and it's $400. I told my husband, I said, once we pay this $400 for this license over here, we ain't ever leaving. I ain't never paid $400 for no license.
Right. That's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all need to go ahead and buy a home there. Just call it your second.
We're working on that. On that. So you have to be here for at least 2 years. And so to be able to get a loan here, you can get a loan back in the States too. But it just makes the paperwork just a little bit trickier. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
So can I ask you this question? Obvious, now you're in the Caribbean, and you as the person, not you as the professional, not you with all your training. What was the transition process for your family? Because I'm assuming up until that point, your children have been born and raised in North Carolina for the most part. I don't know if is your husband North Carolinian as well?
Yes, he is. He's North Carolinian in country too.
Which is he from Winston as well, or somewhere else?
No, he's from I can see it. It's Alamance County.
He's from Alamance? Okay.
But yeah.
I mean, it's Alamance.
Yeah.
So we already.
I think the biggest part for my family, my sister, my twin, she was truly ecstatic for me. When we both left Greenville, North Carolina from ECU, she moved to Charlotte. I came 3 years later. Hint, hint. Then she moved to Indianapolis. And then by that time, when I moved, she was in Washington State and was about to get to Ohio State. Now she's the VP of Ohio State. Yeah. She was like, okay. Actually, we're closer in flight compared to me trying to fly all the way to Washington State right outside of Seattle. Yeah. But my mama and my grandma down, my aunties, all the baby cousins, the ones that we used to babysit, like, oh, we got a place to come for vacation. They ecstatic. So it's like siblings ecstatic, cousins ecstatic, aunties and uncles and mama like hell to the no.
That generation is like,
have you lost your mind? Right. But they knew that I had been applying multiple times. They knew when I went to Cyprus. They knew about the job in China. But because I had turned both of those down, they thought that the process had stopped. Right. And so I think the hardest part for anyone was my mom. Because after going through my divorce with my first husband, her and my first son is close. That's his Yaya, as he calls her. And they would be together every other weekend. I think the tears watching them two is what broke my heart and made me stop and pause and second guess. Because the relationship that I had with my grandmother was just as close as the one that my son has with my mom. And I was like, okay, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. And I had to remind myself that I'm trying to create generational wealth that encompasses both freedom financially, but freedom when it comes to experiences and culture and so much more. Mm-hmm. Since I've been here, though, even in the midst of COVID, my mama has been over here 3 times. So now that's not a problem at all. She good to go. She passport ready.
So we get asked the most random questions here at the Black Expat. Everything from who ships hair care products internationally to where can I find a solid expat tax professional? This is why we're soon launching a new resource called Buy While Abroad. It's a business directory to connect expats and travelers with the companies that deliver the products and services they need while they are abroad. So if you're a business owner and your business can cater to global nomads, especially a diverse clientele, you should visit buywhileabroad.com and share your email address. We will keep you posted when we go live and definitely tell you how you can join.
All right, so we're back, and I wanted to ask you this question because this is always a common question I think about when I talk to people who are expatting, although you are a citizen and where you are currently residing. I'm sorry, because when I scheduled this interview, I didn't make the connections about how she was going to go from Winston-Salem to St. Martin, but kudos to you for the dual citizenship. But like, what has been the experiences for you personally and the differences being a Black woman and a Black family in a predominantly Black and brown country after obviously living in a country where you've been a minority? Like, what kind of struck you? What was unexpected? What's the good, the bad, just the different?
So we haven't had any bad. We've since we've been here, we've only had good experiences. Mm-hmm. What's so funny is because I have locks in my hair.
Yeah.
My husband has a bald head. But until we open up our mouths, we are seen as someone from St. Martin.
Gotcha.
Until we open up our mouths and speak, and we're not speaking Dutch or Spanish or some other, because they're very much a melting pot here. They don't know that we're not, wasn't born and raised here. And so we're treated as such. Mm. But even when we do speak, kindness, asking, of course, where are you from? And everyone automatically thinks that we're from New York. I'm like, no, we're from the South.
Right.
We're not from New York. Everyone's not from New York.
Right.
And it's interesting. I remember one story. We had been over here and it had just opened back up and I had to go grocery shopping. So my son was at home and I went out by myself. So driving over here, ma'am, interesting people. You drive to the point where you have to keep up with traffic or they will go around you or run.
Right. Okay. So they're aggressive. Gotcha.
Oh, very aggressive. But I was in the grocery store and literally I had a person who was stocking up stuff follow me around the grocery store to make sure I knew where everything was. Hey, what's next on your list? Okay, come to this aisle. And he was just asking questions about where I'm from. Very, very helpful. And I had to be in there for at least an hour. So, of course, the Black woman in me, like, is he trying to holler? But he wasn't. He was just truly being helpful.
Because I was in Food Line yesterday. Let me tell you, there was a lot of things going on, but help was not one.
Look, back in the States, staying in Charlotte, grocery shopping in Walmart, I've had the most craziest experience with Black guys walking up to me.
Right.
And you just don't do that.
Right.
You just don't.
Right.
But here, it was so different.
It's friendly.
Like, can I help you? Can I really help you? Find what you're needing. That's the beauty of it. My loctician over here, she just welcomed me with open arms. I got lost. So I walked in, I was crying and sweating at the same time because I got lost trying to find it. I literally was in their downtown area circling and I called her like, it's almost 45 minutes into my session. I cannot find you. She said, where are you at? She found the landmark and she literally stood on the phone and walked me to her place, which was actually only 2 blocks over. But I'm sweating. So I came in, she said, sit, let me get you some tea. Just take a breather. She said, it's going to be okay. I'll work you in. And it's like, that was one of my first experiences. My second experience is just once again, just people being welcoming because I have a big fear of being lost. Like literally I was sweating from every pore and she's like, just take a breather. It's okay. It happens. I'm just like, shit.
Oh my gosh.
And then it felt just like I was back at home because we started gossiping about
everybody and everything.
Mm-hmm.
How is it adjusting to island life? What's sort of the differences? Because I think that people, you see the shows or you go somewhere for vacation. What's different living on an island versus just visiting, you think?
Caribbean time is like Black people time on steroids.
Okay.
Okay. They say, so we got here like, okay, this is when we get here. This is when we're going to come and hook up your internet. This day and time. 2 weeks go by.
Oh no.
I'm like,
2 weeks.
What? I was like, so really everything is very slow paced. they believe in taking they Sundays off. Everything shuts down on Sundays, just about. Only I think maybe 1 or 2 grocery stores is actually even open. All stores, everything shuts down.
Okay. Yeah.
The Ace is our Walmart over here. Okay. They sell furniture and like other goods, everything except for groceries. I was like, I'm used to going to Ace. It's the hardware store. It's hardware and other over here. And so, and then I learned that groceries is very, very expensive, and you need to buy only for like what you're going to cook within that day and the next day, because they don't have a lot of pesticides and stuff, and additives into their food. Mm-hmm. So I remember going to buy meat and I put it in the freezer like we normally do, because I'm going to cook it towards the end of the week. And I got out to defrost it and it was just spoiled. I'm like, what in the world? So I had to learn that, that most people don't go freeze meat. They buy meat the same day that they go, that they're going to cook it, or the very next day. So I lost a couple of $100 worth of groceries because I was shopping the Black people way, deep freezer, right, that type of thing.
We buy in bulk, right? Especially the bigger your family, but we're so used to buying in bulk because there's a sale and there's a deal. Yes. But there is something about buying just what you need.
Yes.
I know it's so revolutionary, but that's most of the world, right? It's just in the States because we got big fridges to accommodate, right? Mm-hmm, and so, I've had those experiences where I'm like, why is this fruit bad already? And it's like, it's been 3 days. I'm like, it's been 3 days. Why is it bad already?
Yeah. And so that I learned that just to buy what we need. And then our first Thanksgiving over here in making banana pudding, I spent, close to $50 just to make a pan of banana pudding, because the box of wafers was $8 a box. And so I remember taking a picture and putting it on social media. They was like, you better not buy that box. I said, I got to buy the box. I promised my husband I was going to make some banana pudding. Okay.
Or somebody got to bring it in a suitcase.
Look, I was like, I said, somebody ship me some wafers over here.
When I lived people laugh at me of this, but I don't care. One of the things I tell folks is that when you move somewhere, at least for the early part, take the spices and the things you're accustomed to cooking with, because you don't know where you can find them yet in the country you're in, or if they've got them. Now, it's a little bit different here in the Caribbean. So my sister came the first time she visited me in Doha, and she had a suitcase, which was like Lowry's. Literally, it was like Lowry's, and like it was every seasoning you could imagine. And
I need some.
I know, right? And she brought like garlic salt, all this stuff, because I could not find what I was used to. So she said, "Yeah, I just went to Walmart and bought like $40 worth of." Actually, it was like $50 worth of.
That's love.
But
that's
seriously
love.
Though, and so, but I'm thinking about what you just said, like, if somebody's coming to visit you and you want to make a banana pudding or whatever, the first thing I'll probably say to you is, what food do you want me to slide into my suitcase that I can bring to you? Because people don't realize how expensive, especially if you're coming from somewhere where we live, where, we think food's expensive, but then we go to other places and go, nah, that costs $15 for that bacon. We about to not eat pork ever again.
Ever. And then especially it scared me the first time we went to the grocery store and it said like $350 NAF. They use guilders over here. That's their monetary. And they also use the euro. Okay. And so at the grocery store, they use the guilders. And it's like, $350 NAF guilders. And I was like, $350? Right. They're like, they're like, are you paying in euro, guilders, or US? I said US. They're like, that's only $125. Explain this to me. I'm new here. Right. Help me.
Right.
So yeah.
So let me ask you this as someone who's a practitioner, a clinician. What are some of the transitional challenges you're seeing for your, with the populations you guys are working with? Obviously, most people don't understand. Most of your students, faculty, staff are not from St. Martin, right? They're coming in for an internet. They're coming in for education. They're coming in for a professional opportunity. What are some of the things, and I'm thinking about this as the folks that we have that move across the world, that you see people experience that they don't even anticipate that they're going to experience moving somewhere new that maybe might be a challenge?
Homesickness is real. But there's so many layers to homesickness. Of course, the most common one is, this is my first time really away from home. Because I went to college, it was in my hometown or in my home state. Or even if they went out of state, this is the first time they've ever been this far from their family. That's the first biggest thing that we're dealing with, is just adjustment. The second part of the adjustment is dealing with many of our cultural students who are coming from different countries in Africa, India, or maybe first and second gen students, and their parents are from those countries where they were very much coddled, and they lived in very restrictive environments.
Gotcha. So very, very supported in. That's the nice way to say it. But
that's the nice way. They didn't have, let's just say they didn't have many life experiences. And so coming, even being in college, some of them say that they, have to still have a curfew at 9:00. So many life experiences they didn't have. So when they come over here, they don't have the tools to truly adjust because they're so used to their parents taking care of everything. So it's teaching them to be independent, teaching them that they can trust their own decision-making skills, and teaching them that they can still rely on their parents, but now they're looked at as more supportive than the action person to implement whatever it needs to be done. So adjustment is the biggest piece. And then unfortunately, just like we're seeing in the trends of mental health across all colleges, we've seen an uptick of students who come in with lived experiences of trauma, typically domestic violence, sexual assault, childhood abuse. And so, and they range. Some have went through their own previous counseling and some have never experienced it. And the pace and the rigor of medical school exasperates the symptoms that they've been living with. And so if they're not able to tackle it and get it under control, it's their mental health and well-being will impact their academic success. And so that's the second part. And then the other biggest thing is test anxiety. And imposter syndrome is the last one. We are a Caribbean medical school. And so for some of these students, they either are here by tradition, their parents, uncle, auntie, cousins, one of them went to this school or a similar school, or this was their last option. They couldn't get into the U.S. medical schools due to a variety of reasons, or even the Canadian ones, because we have some students from Canada. And so they were the top students in some ways, but because they couldn't make it in those schools, they come here saying, yes, this is my second chance. This is my time to get, to fully follow my purpose. But then they constantly doubt themselves of, should I be here? Do I deserve to be here? And so we're dealing with, once again, imposter syndrome and doing different types of workshops and one-on-ones with students to really increase their confidence in their identity.
You brought up something really interesting. As you were speaking, because I was thinking about, especially that second point you made about coming from backgrounds or stories where there may have been some trauma. Just, and this is now me asking you as the professional, when someone moves into a different environment, do you see that this can be like sort of those, I guess, the aftermath of that sort of be exasperated because you're in a new environment? Or is it one of those cases where, you would hope that an individual has had the support from where they were before and they use those coping mechanisms? Like, because I think about our expats a lot, right? Because none of us have perfect stories, right? Some of us move and leave for a variety of reasons. Sometimes because of the trauma at home is why we leave, right? And so I'm just curious, just in terms of, is it just in your perspective, if maybe moving has also kind of exasperated some of the aftermath of that?
It has. Most people don't consider moving overseas to be a small trauma. If we had to put a term to it, but it can be very traumatic for some people. They don't have the skills or the lived experience. This is their first time ever traveling overseas. Many students' first time ever getting on a plane or even having to get a passport. For those students who've experienced trauma, coming over here puts them in the center of a power struggle. Can I do this? Do I have the power and the resources to survive? Again, something that's going to be a new challenge. I've survived whatever they may have experienced in their past childhood or young adulthood, but now I'm faced with a new challenge. Can I excel at this Caribbean medical school? Can I live on my own? And can I do this all once again, while once again away from every single resource and tool that I'm used to having?
And that translates whether you're a student or not, right? Right? Because to be honest, that's something you had to go through because you'd never lived. Sure, you have your family, but none of y'all had ever lived on the island before.
No.
Right?
Never lived on the island. Again, I've traveled. I've been to a couple of Caribbean islands on vacation. but nothing more than a week. And again, we were living typically on some type of hotel or resort.
Yeah.
So we're on our own. We at our own apartment.
So now that you're on the other side, obviously you're living there. What are and in light of what you just said, what are some of the healthier coping mechanisms if you are moving into a new environment? Would you say, hey, here are some of the things you want to consider or be aware of to help you thrive in that space?
I create family and being vulnerable in having to create friends as an adult, which is something that a lot of adults don't talk about. But we typically have our friends, and having to create new friends is hard sometimes for a lot of adults. And I'm an introvert by heart anyway. So I created my family at work. I haven't got to create my family within the community because of COVID, but that's something that's on my agenda. And then I created family outside of work, those who I consider to be my colleagues, who I also consider now to be family. So we had to create community within for us. And then for my husband, he's the stay-at-home father. He's the ruler of the household. So now he is a part of the mom's crew. And so he got his little chat group and stuff like that. And, he has to make sure he has those supports for him. So we had to think outside the box, because we're both pretty much introverts, me and my husband. And so we're not schmoozers by any means. And so we had to make sure that we ask questions and surround ourselves with people who can provide knowledge for us. So I would say that would be the first thing.
And because I want to jump in there, because since you mentioned it. So for your husband, obviously moving to St. Maarten, did he have to change his career?
My husband's new career is he is the stay-at-home father, and he's the ruler of the household. My husband was a over-the-road truck driver for 22 years, so he was his own person.
Wow. So that did that end once you guys got married, or once you decided to come to the island? Where did it? Or was he already?
It ended when we came to the island. So while we was over there and we were married, he continued to drive trucks, but he came off the road. So he would drive locally and come home in the evenings. But that did a lot for him. And so that was one of the discussions, is that they talk about the rules when it comes to employment on the island. Now that we're citizens, we have rights for employment, but the rules are natural citizens are eligible for jobs first. We're considered second.
Right.
And so my husband especially was driving like gas for cars. And so I remember being over here doing an interview. I said, baby, there's a gas tanker. He said, I'm not driving over here. I'm not driving over here. These people are crazy in driving. He said, I'm going to retire if you get this job. And I said, okay. And so that was a conversation that we had, that became more of a joke until fruition. I said, I really can't focus on being a director and a professor here, and trying to balance that and my private practice. I still have clients back in the States, and trying to still take care of home. And so our compromise and what works for us is that even if we ever come back to the States, he's going to always be the provider of the household. He's going to take care of the household. He runs a very tight ship. He has the schedule down to the T.
Look.
He left for 1 week to go home and spend time with family and to celebrate his nephew retiring from the military. And I promise you,
it all fell apart.
I don't care how many degrees I got. I was not prepared. Okay. It's not fair. I was like, when are you coming home? I didn't mess up the schedule. He didn't miss swimming lessons. When are you coming home?
My God. No, but, and thank you for being so authentic about that. Cause I've had a previous guest who talked about, look, when we, she's a woman, when they decided to go overseas, her husband essentially had to change and or give up his career. Right. And he was totally okay. Like they had, just like you said, they had a conversation about it. He was okay about being a stay-at-home dad. And I always say this because, and I've been doing the Black Expat now for about 6 years, but like early on, there was some folks who were like, I don't know, Black men would stay at home and have an issue if the woman is the one who, he ain't doing something. But I'm like, no, there are plenty of Black men who are doing it, but it's a conversation about expectations and what's going to be fulfilling for everybody and what's going to be for the family. Yes. And so, but the funny part is women have been doing this for centuries.
And we don't get questioned about it.
No one asks. It's just like your partner's going, you going with them.
Exactly. And I asked them, I said, are your boys clowning you? And he said, you know, his good friends, of course they would still clown him, but they truly would tell him in a minute, we're so happy for you. And they're all truck drivers. They're like, if I can come off the road, they like, I will give it up in a second. They're like, feel free to, you know, divorce Sherrá and pass it to me. I will quit. And so, you know, his good homeboys, but yeah, he had some associates who thought it was the running joke. Oh, now you got to be a stay-at-home mom. No, he's a wonderful father.
Yeah.
Whatever term you want to call it. And he's doing a pretty, damn good job when it comes to it. But I would say overall, he did have to have some, funny yet tough conversation with some of his homeboys. I'm like, yeah, the definition of what a Black family looks like is whatever we wanted to create it to be. And we made that rule that we are going to create our family based off of the values that we choose to bring from our childhood experiences, and then what we want to create for ourselves.
Wow.
And so we just create new things. And so a one working household is what we have.
And it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it works.
Works great.
And, you mentioned your private practice,
mm-hmm.
Sister Wells. And y'all need to visit the site. So I'm gonna put it up in the notes. You are still seeing clients, amazingly enough.
I am. They keep me busy and they keep me on my toes.
And are your clients in North Carolina, in the US, or throughout the world? Where are they?
So our Sister Wells, we do both counseling and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
For counseling, U.S. law states that we can only practice within the state that we're licensed in. So I'm only counseling North Carolina residents. Mm-hmm. But for coaching, because I do coaching for career, I do some coaching for life coaching. They can be anywhere in the U.S. or even abroad. Mm-hmm. So we do provide that those types of services too.
And first of all, this is a site worth visiting, because I was on it and going, look at all these resources. I want to support this. But more importantly, I'm trying to figure out where you're balancing with these kids and this family and this job. How are you able to still run? And I know that you've got partners, obviously your sister and your very close friend, but how are you still able to sort of balance that with everything else you got going on?
I do not mind sharing my self-care. So I see 2 clients per night,
wow,
at least 4 days a week. And every other week, every other Saturday, I will see clients up to 4 or 5 on the weekends. And then I take 1 week off per month where I don't see any clients in my private practice. And when I made that change in coming over here, I sent it in an email and I talked with each one of my clients. I had some who needed something different than what I was going to be able to offer. Mm-hmm. And I got them referred out to additional therapists locally for them. But I would say 90% of my clients stuck and stayed with me.
Nice. Wow.
Because they are, some are mothers, some are not. But they welcome my honesty, and I believe in practicing what I preach. If I'm telling them boundaries, I have to be able to do the same. So yeah, I take a week off every month where I don't see clients, and then I limit to just 2 clients per week, 2 clients per night, 4 days a week, which also limits the amount of clients I have as far as my caseload. So yeah,
like I say, you obviously do coaching and you do counseling, and there's consulting obviously that happens through what you guys are doing. For you, what's the type of clientele, or what's your areas of expertise?
Oh, my areas of expertise is dealing with minority women, typically with mood disorders, life changes, career changes, also dealing with chronic illnesses and disease. So being a counselor these last 11 years, most of my career has functioned typically at the intersection of medical and counseling. So I've worked as an embedded counselor in different types of medical programs. So I worked working with clients living with HIV and AIDS, living with sickle cell disease and hemophilia, also living with lupus. So I deal with that very intersection of minority clients who live with those different types of lived experiences. And so most of my clients are minority women dealing with those different types of issues.
So needed, very needed. I wish I could duplicate you, but I can't. I'm also kind of envious the fact that you're better at self-care than I am. I'm the worst. I would say I'm the worst. I'm the worst counselor. I'm like, y'all need a self-care plan, and I don't. And I have to.
It took time though. I literally had to sit there and say that if I was going to do this, because completely honest, my self-care when I was in the States, I had an office.
Yeah.
And I was there every single night and sometimes every weekend. So I'm going to own it. The move made me change how I viewed balance between family and work.
Mm.
I think the hardest part of why I gave so much to Sister Wells and to my clients is because I consider counseling to be my ministry work. Ministry is a part of my family. As you heard, I shared that we are a singing family, and some are actually ministers. I got a couple of cousins that are ministers, and I don't see myself in the pulpit. I figure that my pulpit is the couch. And so that's my way of being able to give back to clients. And I live by the saying, I give back what was freely given to me. Someone poured it to me, someone gave to me, and I want to give that back. And I just had to learn there has to still be a balance to that. That I can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
The cup cracked, broken, and empty.
Right. It's like drizzling out the side, but we're trying to know. Yes, girl, I feel you. If we can all do better of taking care of ourselves, I think that half of our issues would be set aside. But the problem is, I think especially you're in a helping profession, you're a helper by nature. And there's never a point where there's not one more person to help. And it is. I mean, I'm even as we're doing this interview, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I got one more student. That's just like one more student that's got this issue. And so, but it's really cool to hear how really moving for you, you kind of embraced kind of that wellness and are actually practicing it, which probably is making you a better counselor than even maybe what you were in before, because you are in a different mind space, I would imagine.
Yes.
So
yes. I would think so. My clients, what I've learned is that the new clients that I gained since coming over here all have, to me, been God sent. They typically have been, what I say in my purpose, either they are experiencing something that I've already overcome, am going through now, or will be to come. And so that's how I see it as ministry work. It allows for me to see glimpses of how God has, has blessed me. And also how the things that I'm going through reminds me that I'm not doing this alone.
Awesome.
And that as they seek me for help, it humbles me to be able to be reminded that whatever work I still have to do, to still do that.
Yeah.
But I can be that place of safety for them.
Awesome. And I think you're doing amazing work. Like I said, everybody got to check out your site. So where can they find you? Even though I'm going to have it all in the show notes.
Yes, you are welcome to come to the well, as we say. Yeah. You can go to www.sisterwells.org, and that's plural with an S after Wells.
And it will take you to all the various other pieces they've got going on. And I have asked Sherrá for her list of resources in terms of, for those of you who are looking for mental wellness and health. And so just off the top of your head, and I'm gonna link it so you don't have to read everything. What are a couple of places that you think for folks who are looking for sort of mental wellness support they should check out?
I definitely, I always say therapy for Black girls and therapy for Black men. One of my newest favorite ones is clinicians of color and inclusive therapists. They both have directories, and they both also have resources. And then the last one is Melanin and Mental Health, is also a good resource for many minority clients.
Perfect. And I'm going to list those up. Some of them I've obviously heard of. The last couple I haven't. So I'm really glad to hear about that. And of course, because they're directories, hopefully everyone can do a search to see those who are comfortable working with globally based clients, because that's always the question. I'm in Turkey, but I would like a counselor who kind of understands some of the cultural experiences as well. So,
and it just depends on the country. That's the biggest thing. Some countries will allow for us to practice here, but I know there are a few that won't, no matter if we're licensed in the U.S. or not.
Gotcha. So that's the key part. And I know you got to say that, because I swear someone's going to say, can I work with her? And I'm going to have to be like, well, I don't know where you're at. If you in North Carolina, yes, for sure. I don't know what happened. Oh no, yes, for sure.
Yes,
okay,
yes, for sure.
I don't know what happens beyond the 919, 910, 336. What we at 704? Yes. Like, I don't know what happens beyond those area codes. It's a little tricky, but Sherrá, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I have loved hearing your story and just sort of the advice that you've given. And man, you got me. I got to visit St. Martin. Honestly, look, I haven't been in the Caribbean. Like,
you gotta come. So this is a more expensive Caribbean island compared to some like St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands.
Still,
but it's still beautiful.
Right,
beautiful.
And more importantly, why I should come. It's actually been on my bucket list, so I'm excited to. And I was happy to hear your experiences, but. For everyone who's looking to connect with her, as I said, we will have all the information listed on our website as well as in our show notes. And you can catch up with her at sisterwells.org. I'm saying this right, not .com, right? But once again, thank you again for listening to The Global Chatter, and we'll catch you on the next time.
Bye.
You just heard an episode of the Global Chatter podcast, a project by the Black Expat. It's hosted by me, Amanda Bates, and it's edited by Stephanie Fuccio. To learn more about this podcast or to learn more about the Black Expat, visit theblackexpat.com.